Welcome back to the Creator Spotlight Podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Sneddon, creator of Naptown Scoop, a daily local newsletter for residents of Annapolis, Maryland. Ryan's been at it for 3.5 years. He started in August 2020, and since then, he's built up a subscriber list of over 18,000, representing almost half of Annapolis's population. Last year, the business generated about $200,000 in revenue. I spent an hour with Ryan talking about how he got half the town to subscribe, how he prices ad spots, all the benefits of running the town's favorite newsletter, expanding to other cities, how he plans to nearly double his revenue to $350,000 this year, and plenty more. As always, thank you for listening and enjoy. For the listeners, who are you and what do you do?
So I am Ryan Sneddon, and I basically write newsletters. That's my thing. Mostly local newsletters, but also now write a newsletter about newsletters, teaching people how to write local newsletters. And I have about, probably 5 or 6 more newsletters that I want to start. And, that's a generalization to call them newsletters. It really is just a different kind of media company, and newsletter happens to be the main product. But when I do these things, I do try and think about them as more than just a newsletter. A newsletter is just a way to reach an audience, just like a podcast, just like a magazine was, and I guess kind of still is. I think it's the best way right now. And yeah, it kind of still is, but like, who reads the newspaper anymore? And it's definitely my favorite way to reach an audience.
Yeah. So going into your background, you've talked about this in some other interviews, you don't have a journalistic background. You studied mechanical engineering in college, I think. And I'm curious, I think of that as such a, systems and problem solving, et cetera. So did that set you up in any unique way or advantageous way to do what you do now, be a newsletter publisher?
Yeah. So I think that the engineering definitely set me up, but I think also having that creative side of you, I had to read a book in my first, it's called Fundamentals of Engineering. It's taught by this crazy guy named Wally at the University of South Carolina. If anybody's listening and was an engineer, they'll know Wally. He made us read this book called A Whole New Mind. I think it's by Daniel Pink. And the whole premise of the book was, if you have both of those, the creative side and the deeply analytical engineering side, then you will be incredibly dangerous, and dangerous in a good way. And Wally made us read this book because Wally's trying to make us be engineers that can communicate and also creatively think and get really high paying jobs, because most engineers suck at communicating and they're not very creative. They're just math nerds. So his whole premise was, if you can do both of these things, then you'll be an absolute rock star. And I really took that to heart. I already kind of had the creative side. I had done some photography and film in high school, some professionally. So I kind of had it. And then I got the engineering side. And then after engineering, I went back and did more creative stuff, got the writing side. And then that ended up being where I'm still at now, and kind of found my, what do they call it? Zone of expertise, I don't know, like that, what I'm talking about? That thing you're good at and you also like doing. I feel like that's where I'm at now.
That perfect Venn diagram overlap.
Yeah.
So with the writing too, after college or right before Life of Scoop, you had something called the Daily Thread, which I couldn't find an archive of it, but what I could find is that it was a outdoors focused newsletter that you did for almost a year. What was that, and how is that at all a precursor to Naptown Scoop?
It is a precursor, but there's a fundamental problem with what you just said. You said outdoor focus. There was absolutely no focus. The Daily Thread was a terrible newsletter. It was a terrible project, but it did teach me all the basics of how to start a newsletter and how to just the mechanics of it, actually technically software. But it was a terrible newsletter. I did it for almost a year. It got to, I think it topped out at 800 subscribers with a 35% open rate, back when open rates actually kind of mattered. I think it made a grand total of $300 or something. I think I spent $500 or $800 on it. And then I started Naptown Scoop as I was doing it at the same time, and got Naptown Scoop to maybe not quite in the first month, but pretty damn close to being in the first month that had more subscribers than the Daily Thread. And I was like, okay. And it had also made more money. And I was like, I think that one of these things is not like the other. I'm gonna shut down the Daily Thread. And I actually sold it.
Yeah.
I said I was going to shut it down, and one of my subscribers bought it for $800. That was my first exit. But yeah, it was a terrible newsletter. But it definitely taught me how to write, for sure, because I wrote a lot. I think it was once a week. I don't think it was every day. I think it was once a week. But I would write a lot for it. It was like probably close to 1,000 words. It was either talking about some outdoor sport or some outdoor adventure person or some piece of gear because I love men's clothing and tactical gear and stuff like that. So it wasn't focused enough. One week I was writing about the first couple to climb the 7 summits together, and then the next week I was writing about all the Easter eggs in Pixar movies. I don't know why I did that, but it definitely taught me about writing, taught me how to be a good writer, and it taught me the mechanics of writing a newsletter or setting up a newsletter. So by the time I decided to do Naptown Scoop, I had it set up and running, and like I think I set it up one night and started running Facebook ads the next day, and then wrote the first episode a week later. And so it was just nice to know all that technical stuff that made the setup super easy. Now you can find YouTube videos for all that, and you don't need to waste 8 months of your life on a newsletter that's never going anywhere. But
that's not a waste, is it? Right? Like I feel like it's like you have to do the bad newsletter before you can do the good newsletter, because you have to like learn what not to do. I don't know. I think that's like people want to just like start something and make it perfect and good, and then maybe they like end up planning it and strategizing, and then they never even start. And like you have to like make it terrible before you can make a new thing that's good, right?
Yeah, I am a big fan of sucking at something before you get good at it. Like I almost kind of enjoy the sucking phase. I'm kind of learning how to play chess right now, and I have played I think I played 36 games this week online, and I haven't won a single one. And it'll probably be several more weeks before I do. So I kind of enjoyed that sucking phase, but yeah, I wish it wasn't 8 months for the newsletter. I really honestly thought that it was going to go make me enough money to survive and live. And it was not just a side hustle. Like I had actually quit my job to build this thing, which is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But luckily I ended up starting Naptown Scoop.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I didn't realize you'd actually quit your job to start it. Like it sounds like you
Well,
probably should have done
I
it for
didn't
like
quit my job to start the daily thread. Like I quit my job to do something, and I figured it was going to be publishing like online content. And then that would just happen to be the first thing I did. And I'm glad I stopped doing it eventually. And the guy who bought it ended up shutting it down. I was like, it's gone forever. It's completely gone.
Yeah. What drew, because I think you quit your job like shortly before COVID, unless I'm wrong. So like, why were you like, the next thing I got to do, like I gotta start making content online and like making a living like that? Like what really drew you to that?
Well, a guy everybody knows in the newsletter world named Sam Parr started, the hustle. And I had this mentor in South Carolina who showed me the hustle, and I absolutely loved it. And then I saw these other newsletters in South Carolina that were like local newsletters, which is eventually why I ended up doing that Naptown Scoop. But I was like, yeah, this newsletter thing is cool, and owning an audience is cool. And if you have an audience, you can sell them anything you want. So I'm going to go do that. And also they're easy to start, and they're basically free. And you can, it's an internet business. You could do it from anywhere. If the daily thread had actually worked, or let's say I started a different newsletter that had been more successful, but it was about, let's say I had stuck to the adventure sports phase. Like I could have done that from anywhere. Now my local newsletter, I kind of have to be in Annapolis, but if something else had worked out, I could have run it from, traveling the world like a digital nomad, like everybody thinks they want to be, and then end up doing, and then actually realize that you can't really do it for that long because it's kind of exhausting. But I could have had that and could have done that. So I liked that idea of that flexibility. And to be honest, I just looked at it and was like, I could do that.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned like Sam Parr, The Hustle, My First Million. I think like I've spoken to, I don't know, maybe a dozen people for this since I joined, and I think like 4 or 5 of you have said, I was inspired by My First Million. It's like there's this quote about like Lou Reed, The Velvet Underground, where it's like that record only sold 10,000 copies or 30,000 copies, but everyone who bought one went and started a band. And I feel like that newsletter or like that like whatever, Sam Parr, My First Million, Sean Perry, like they are that of newsletters. But anyways, moving on.
Yeah, they definitely, now they kind of joke about it. Like they're like, why is everybody starting newsletters? Like newsletters are done. They should, like, it's time to do the next thing. But I definitely am part of that. I was like kind of early, I think maybe a little bit into that whole craze, but it's still definitely not one of the OGs like they are, or Sam is at least. And I guess then Sean made himself a newsletter OG. I always kind of forget about Milk Road. because like Milk Road didn't inspire me. I was already doing my thing by then. I liked watching its journey, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go start Milk Road like that. I was like, I'm gonna start the hustle for Annapolis. I'm not like so OG that I was like inspired by the skim, but the hustle's still pretty close.
I think you said this in another podcast I was listening to. Like anyone can go start an AI newsletter, but like there's not many people that are going to start a newsletter about Annapolis, which like it's about 40,000 people, right? Like just over 40,000. You started this 3.5 years ago, and I think you have like about half the city is on your list, right? So yeah,
Yeah, we have
give us like
18,000.
the origin story. 18,000. Wow.
Yeah. So origin story is pretty simple. Like I said, I was in South Carolina and I was looking at this local newsletter there and I was like, this is pretty cool. I like knowing what's going on. And then I realized that they were doing that same concept in 6 other cities. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I must be making a lot of money with this. So I signed up for all 7 of them, got the price sheet, made a spreadsheet, and I was like, sign up for everyone. They're running, they're probably discounting their sales volume discounts and everything. So probably wasn't exact, but I was like, I think they're making like $500,000 per city. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do that. Or I didn't think that right away. I think I thought, I was like, that's kind of cool. And then that
Subconsciously, it was there.
yeah. So it was like filed away. And then when I moved back out of South Carolina, back to Maryland, where I grew up, quit my job in January, moved back in like May, I think. And then by July, I was bored out of my mind. Daily Thread was not growing. And I was
It
like,
was unraveling.
I wish I knew. Yeah, the thread was unraveling. I don't think it's ever raveled to begin with. So I was looking around and I was like, I want something to do. But I couldn't, there was like nothing to tell me what was happening in town. And I was like, oh, wait, I remember those local newsletters down in South Carolina. I wish I knew what was going on here. Maybe I could do that. And I wrote about it in the Trends Facebook group. I don't know if you remember Trends, the hustle product that was like the premium product that they did. And people went like decently viral. People were pretty excited to hear about it. And they were like, can I invest in you? Like, this is great. And I was like, oh no, I wasn't looking for that. I was just like kind of writing about the idea here. But then partially because of the excitement of that Facebook post, I decided to go and do it. And that is the origin story. I, like basically wrote the post, woke up the next day and saw how many comments and everything it had on it. And then I was like, cool. Instead of answering all these comments, I'm going to go actually do it. So I made the website. I think I made the website that night. Just a pretty quick like a one-page website on Webflow, and then made a Facebook account, started running ads for it, and started, I think, a week later. Sent the first email on August 17th. Dirty little secret of Naptown Scoop, I don't actually think that was the first day. I didn't really archive well in the beginning, but that is the earliest archive that I have. And I'm pretty sure it was actually August 10th, but we just go with August 17th from now on.
Yeah. Were you like, I think you were on MailChimp at the time?
Yep, started on MailChimp because
Yeah.
that was what you did back then. Like all the other ones like kind of felt clunky. And so there was no Beehive. This is like well before Beehive was around. I guess ConvertKit was around, but I don't think I found that one. MailChimp was just like, they had the best marketing. They were the biggest and everybody knew them.
Now you have 18,000 people. I'm curious, like, obviously the audience is people who live in Annapolis and maybe people visiting, etc. But like, who is the Naptown Scoop? Like, what does it make people feel like to read, to be a subscriber, to be somebody who like subscribes to this?
I wrote about her in the Life of Scoop newsletter 3 weeks ago. I call her Michelle. Basically, Michelle is like the person who probably around 50 years old. She's married. She doesn't work. Her husband has a great job. They're probably members of the yacht club here. They might have a boat. Like she definitely got a brand new Jeep Wagoneer last year. Kids go to private school. Like that's the average reader of the Naptown Scoop. And like that's gross oversimplification. If anybody's reading or hearing this that lives in Annapolis, don't get mad at me. But like that's kind of who we write for. It's like that 50 to 60-year-old woman. I think everybody thinks it's going to be a younger demographic, like because I'm young and it's all on the internet, and everybody thinks it's going to be like all 20 somethings and 30 somethings reading this, but in reality, it is over 50% over the age of 50. And if you extend that down to the 35 or 30, it's like 75%, 80% over the age of 35. It's like mostly older people. and 75% women.
Does that map to the population like breakdown of Annapolis much?
There are definitely more older people here than younger people. It's not really a city where young people move. I mean, it's also just a smaller city, so I think there's less opportunity for young people. It's a pretty expensive place to live.
With this data, you were saying you've got the age breakdown. You said 70% women, et cetera. Do you just gather this through onboarding surveys?
Not through onboarding surveys. It's all done once they're on and signed up and actually like it enough to give us some information. But yeah, it's all self-reported.
Yeah, I feel like with something like this, where it's like such a service that you're doing to people, and it's like this relationship thing, like that they probably are more willing to give information than like something that's not like a location specific audience. Which I read somewhere else that you like you thought one of your major differentiators was your relationships and your ability to like message every single person whenever anybody replies to an email, a comment, a DM, etc., and like have that one relationship and like in person too. But I that wherever I read that was like maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. You've scaled since then. Is that still possible, or has that become like not something you can do at a certain point of scale? Is that still your differentiator?
Yeah, it's definitely still there. I don't personally respond to every email anymore. Most of the time, my assistant will answer, but every once in a while, I'll pop into the inbox and I will see something and I'm like, oh, I can handle this really quickly. Or I'll just like handling it. Like last week, I tweeted about this about an hour ago. Somebody emailed me and asked me if I had any tickets to this thing, extra tickets to something happening this weekend. And I didn't because it's super hard to get tickets for it. It's already sold out. Then today, somebody emailed me and was like, hey, I've got 2 extra tickets. Do you know anybody who needs some? And I was like, oh, yeah, like Chip needs some. And so I emailed Chip real quick and I asked him if he still needed tickets. And he was like, oh, wow, yeah, I can't believe you remembered. Like, thanks. And I was like, well, cool. Here's like 2 tickets. Yeah, they're still definitely there, even though we have that a ton of people reading every day. There's still that personal connection. And it's certainly still there in the community in person, face to face. Like, that's something that I take super seriously and will forever. I just think it's the right way to do things. I just can't imagine doing it any other way. Like last weekend, or was it 2 weekends ago? I think it was 2 weekends ago. This couple stopped me in a restaurant, and I wasn't eating dinner or anything. I was out with some friends, but they stopped me and sat down with them and basically spent an hour and a half talking to them at this. I had to get dinner because I wasn't planning on sitting down. So I like sitting with them, grabbed a hamburger, and I think that made them really excited. They love reading the thing. They were excited to meet me. I don't think that should ever go away. I think people will always appreciate that, especially the bigger you get, like the more notable they think you are, and so the more valuable it becomes actually. And you never know what's going to happen to that too. Like you always be open to stuff like that. You never know who you're going to help. Like what if that guy that I don't know who this guy is. He just emailed me and asked if I had any tickets. But what if that guy happened to be the CEO of some gigantic company? And he's like,
Yeah.
I think that, we should advertise with you. You just never know what's going to happen. And that's not why you do it. But if you don't do that from the start, it's really hard to do that
Yeah.
later.
That's really interesting. Actually, something you touched on is how like it's made you this character in town, and like it's the Naptown Scoop, and it's like this media product, but then you are in the signature of it. I think like let me see, I have one of the newsletters up here. You'll say like in the local businesses section, like I'll always let you know when something's sponsored, and like that personal I will. It's not like we will or something. So I'm interested like why if you made that decision really consciously to be like this is Naptown Scoop like by Ryan, or is it like how did that develop? I don't know. It's like because it seems they're somewhat inseparable, like you and Naptown Scoop.
Yeah. So it was never really supposed to be Naptown Scoop by Ryan. I didn't really care that it was by me. It was just always Naptown Scoop is by a real human that lives in your town. And we're going to talk very casually. We're going to just write you this email like we would, if I was sitting down with a friend explaining what's going on this weekend, like that's how I would write it. Like I'm not afraid to write this weekend for the upcoming scoop that the St. Patrick's Day parade is the best one in Annapolis. I don't think the newspaper is ever going to take that strong stance on something because there's 6 other parades that might call them and be like, what the hell? Why'd you say like, what's wrong with my parade? And I'm just not afraid to do that and say, guys, by far, this is the best one. There's not a question. This is the best one. And also to use that first person language, to put some opinion in there. As long as the opinion is not going to piss off too many people, I'm pretty cool with it. But it was never really, I didn't care that it was Naptown Scoop by Ryan. It was more just like Naptown Scoop by real humans who talk like your friend. My writers now, got like the longest running one I've had now, like she'll put her own personal spin on stories when she's writing them, and she's not afraid to put her opinion and her, like share a little bit of her life in there. And I always say, I encourage that, because I always say the same thing. People connect with people, not brands. So who cares if it's Naptown Scoop? But if it's Naptown Scoop and there's some human faces and names attached to it, I feel like I want it to seem like we're sitting on a park bench or like sitting at a brewery together, and I'm telling you what's happening over a beer. That was always the focus and the goal. So it didn't matter that it was by me. I just happened to be the person who was there to do it, and the price was right to hire me. So that was what I did.
I am curious about the team. You were just talking about you've got a couple writers. The most recent thing I could find was that you had one full-time employee and 4 part-time employees. So what is the team? Is that information up to date, or how many people are on the team? What do they do?
Not up to date. We have one full-time person, a full-time assistant who helps out. That is awesome, super helpful. Then we have 2 writers, 3 social media people, but one is very occasional, and the other one is about to go to culinary school in Ireland, so she'll be out for 6 months. And then one is like pretty heavily involved, probably looks at it almost every day, and that's like the overall social media manager. So 2 writers, 3 social media people, but that's about to cut down to 2, but I'm going to try and get it back up to 3. And then I just hired 2 salespeople, and all of those people, they're all part-time.
2 salespeople. Why was now the time to do that? It's just too much to also do the ads now?
Yeah, so I had one. She kind of really helped it get off the ground. Didn't really know a lot about advertising sales, but figured out what she needed to know and was invaluable in getting us where we need to go. And we worked together a lot. And then she had a baby and bought a house and is amazing at her other job, where she makes a whole lot more money than I ever paid her, or could. Her gross salary is more than Naptown Scoop's gross revenue still. So she's an absolute killer at her real job. And so she had to just cut something out of her life. And that was the easiest thing, because, not going to get rid of her house, not going to quit her high paying job, and you can't get rid of your baby. So the thing that was left was Naptown Scoop. So
are these all local people, by the way?
Everybody except the assistant is local. The assistant does live in the Philippines, which is always surprising to people. Yeah, so the time was right for salespeople. I'd had one, and then I didn't have one, and then I kind of had just focused, like let inbound leads take over, and just I didn't do any outbound sales at all, which looking back, if I had, we probably would be much bigger, much faster. But I was focused on hiring writers, outsourcing everything I could. Like, I don't write any ad copy anymore unless I want to. We had enough money to make it. And so I was like, I'm going to focus on these other things, and we'll focus on ad sales later. And we're going to hire a great salesperson. I only wanted to hire one, but I had 2 really amazing people. And I was like, I don't want to let one of you go. And I know I could find you later and always get you back again. It's not like it's now or never, but I just felt like I wanted them both, and I kind of have enough for both of them to make enough money. Neither of them are doing it full time. If one of them was doing it full time, it would have been a disservice to the other one to that one to hire both. But since they're both part time, I can have them both. And so one is working on just our basic ads that are in the newsletter. They're pretty easy to sell. She's basically done the exact same thing before, so she was perfect for it. And then the other one, I just get along really well with, and we're really collaborative. Even in just a couple of meetings we've had, it was very clear that we worked well together. And so he's more like my special projects person, I call him. He's awesome. Like, I probably will talk to him now that he's on board a couple times a week. We'll spend a lot on the phone together, and I wanted them both.
Yeah, you got to have the gap filler, special projects person, I feel like, on like a small business like this.
Yeah, he's like, the person where, what we don't really know exactly what to do here. Like, Mike's job.
Yeah. Before we get into some other stuff, I do want to touch on revenue and like profit, etc. to start, I mean, you said that this other person, like her full-time salary is more than the full revenue that Naptown Scoop makes so far. Are you comfortable sharing like and even like a revenue range?
Oh yeah, so 2023 it was about $200,000. My target for this year is 350, almost double because now that those other things are in place, like I can focus on ad sales most of the day, every day now. Every day that goes by, we're losing revenue possibly because we haven't sold an ad that day. But I still think 350 is a pretty conservative number. This ad salesperson she's a killer. I've already sold before I even put her on. I think it was $175,000 worth of ads for the
Yeah.
2024. So we're already on track. Sell two more contracts than we beat last year already. So that's fine. But I really think we can get to 350, probably more, because once this new salesperson gets going, they'll really get going fast. So it's going to be a slow ramp up, but it always is. And then I have some other projects going on where I think you're targeting. Said haven't even gotten to 250 in revenue yet. Some of these other projects I'm targeting to do that before we even launch with them. We've got normal ad salesperson trying to get us to that 350 based on just the Naptown Scoop newsletter. But then we've got special projects, Mike and I working on a couple things that could get us to 500,000. So I think I would love to get it to $1 million a year or very close. I would be very happy to get a newsletter in a town of 40,000 people to $1 million a year. And then as 10 years from now, obviously the price is going up every year. So hopefully significantly more than that. If we can, my thought process is if I can get Annapolis, 40,000, if I can do that, almost $1 million in business, then what can I do in a city of 120,000 people? Can we do 3 million? Can we do 2.5? Like maybe we can't get to 3, but maybe we can get to 2.5. And you don't need that many people working on this. The
Mhm.
costs associated with getting to 2.5 million are not that high. They're not that much higher than the costs associated with getting it to 1 million. So I love the very simple nature of the business. And then also there's a lot of benefits that you could take out of it that are, the social capital.
Mhm.
Also, a lot of your life that you were already going to live can be expensed because it's part of the business now. So, the profits and the revenue don't tell the whole story. If we were to think about in terms of selling a small business, the term seller's discretionary earnings comes to mind. And there's definitely a lot of benefits there that it gets me.
Yeah. Before we get back into some of the monetary stuff, like it's interesting talking about like you think you can get up to 1 million, etc. I always I think that not every business should scale or is meant to scale, and I like that that's so built into this. Like it's a town of 40,000 people. You can only get so many people to subscribe. You can only sell so much ad revenue or ad placements, etc. So like I don't know. I'd love to hear you talk about how the business is capped in terms of maybe audience revenue, team size, and media output.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I really loved about it when I first discovered the idea. I was like, I could be totally wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that I will run Facebook ads until we get to a certain point, and then I'll just turn them off. And I'll just turn off a giant monthly expense, and I'll never turn it back on unless we'll keep the churn fixed, or fill in the gaps, fill in the leaky bucket with new Facebook ads. But I turned Facebook ads off probably a year and a half ago, and I haven't run any more since, and it still gets bigger every single week. And so I'm like, yeah, I was right. You can spend a ton in the beginning, get to some point, and then just shut them off and keep growing. The snowball is already rolling. It's not like we're just saying, yep, all right, we're going to get to a certain number and then we can't get any, we're just going to shut off Facebook ads. You reach a point of saturation where the new subscribers get prohibitively expensive, but then you can get them in organic ways that don't cost as much, like just people telling their friends about it. But yeah, we got to 15,000 or something before we turned them off, something like that. And that's a pretty good chunk of people in a town of 40,000. Now we cover more than just the town. I think there's probably about 110,000 people that could possibly read it. But even still, that's a very 18,000 out of 110,000 is a pretty significant chunk, a pretty great market penetration.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And then also, I think you now do 5 times a week, but you used to send 3 times a week, right?
That is correct. Actually started with one.
Oh, with
I
once a
sent
week. Okay. Yeah. What's the story of like send cadence growth there?
the story, and it always comes back to money, is started doing it once a week, and then I was like, I'm never going to turn this into a business that makes any enough money for me to live on if I am only sending one a week. Because I at the time I only had 4 ads, or I think I only had one. No, I think I might have had all 4 kinds, or all 2 kinds that I thought of. But then I was like, yeah, no, I can't do this. This is crazy. So I 2 weeks in, I surveyed the audience and I said, would you guys like this to go to 3 times a week, or do you want to keep it at one? And it was like dead even down the middle, but also it was like 150 people. So I just took the survey a bunch of times myself. And then I posted, like I screenshotted the results, and I was like, look, everybody wants 3 times a week. So then I did 3 times a week and nobody cared. Nobody unsubscribed or anything. And then we went on like that for probably about 3 years. And in that time, I said I had one big ad with a photo, and then 3 in each newsletter with not photos, text ads only. All the big ones always sold out really quickly. Everybody wanted those. So in that time, I created another picture one, so another 2 picture ones, and then 3 non-picture ones. And I sold out all those picture ones. And I was like, well, now what do I do? Like, I'm not going to add another one. That would be too much in the newsletter. It's only 1,500 words or 2,000 words. I can't add another 100-word ad. And another picture, it'll just junk it up. So I decided to go to 5 days a week. And this time I learned, and I did not survey the audience. I just announced that, hey, we're now going 5 days a week, and no meaningful drop in open rate or subscribe, like unsubscribes. So it was fine. I was more worried. I knew people liked it. And so I knew that they wouldn't mind getting more of it. I was more worried about having enough content to do it. I don't think you could do 5 days a week in a city any smaller than this, unless you had a ton of bad stuff going on or something
How
like
do you
that.
how do you get all that content for 5 days a week? That is like a
So
sounds like a
we're
lot.
checking a bunch of places every day, and then also people are sending us stuff. That's like the most annoying question to me, and I'm not getting angry at you for asking it, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
just like people, they always ask. They're like, how do you get all your content? And I'm like, we go look for it. Like, it's not that hard of an answer. It's all out
Yeah.
there.
Stuff happens.
Not all of it is out there. Like, we do get told stuff now that isn't anywhere else, which is cool. But in the beginning, we weren't doing that. Nobody was like, "Wait, I'm going to email Naptown Scoop because they have a lot of people and they'll break the story for me." We were just checking all the websites that already exist and all the events calendars we could find, and every social media page that we knew was producing. And I always say we because I don't like saying me, but it was just me. Um, Social media pages that were producing good content regularly. It was just a shit ton of work. It was just like hours and hours of digging through stuff. This is why curation newsletters are valuable, because the regular person that lives in town, especially the busy ones with 3 kids or a high powered job, they don't have time to go do that. They just want you to send it to them in a quick 5 minute email. So that's like kind of the most annoying question when people ask me, like, how do you do that? And you're like, well, you just do the work that's required. There's no secret sauce to it. The secret
Yeah.
sauce might be picking the right ones, because you don't want to put stuff in there that nobody cares about or stuff that pisses people off. But the sauce is not finding it, for sure. At a certain point,
Yeah.
it becomes a little bit of your secret sauce, because like now we're big enough where people do tell us things and they're like, you can talk about this now. Sometimes they say, we're telling you about this, but you can't talk about it until this date. Please don't publish it until then. Sometimes they work with us to help them get the word out, and it's almost like a marketing consultation kind of thing. But that didn't happen in the beginning. It was just all about finding the right information, and it was
Yeah.
all out there.
No.
It just
Yeah.
spend the time.
This I don't know, this you touched on a lot there that's really interesting to me. So it's like the service journalism of a local journalism, right? And obviously local newspapers dying, et cetera, have been for decades. And like what you're doing is important because it is like, it's like it's a real service. Like you're saying, like people will open it. The open rate didn't drop when you start doing 5 times a week because people want to know in 5 minutes what's going on in town. So I am like curious about your your like editorial guidelines, or how you think about that, how you choose what to cover, what not to cover, like because it's this service you're doing that keeps people coming. So yeah, do you have like specific editorial rules that you've follow?
Yeah, I'll start with some easy ones, like no politics, no crime, unless it's like a major, major, major crime that you can't ignore. Like if the mayor, this is always the example I use. Sorry, Gavin, I know you're not listening, but if he was, if the mayor got kidnapped, we're going to write about it. Like you can't not, But if somebody gets carjacked at the Safeway, uh, nobody cares. I hate to say that, trivialize a terrible moment in somebody's life. But the average, what I always think about is, does the average citizen of Annapolis, like, does our average reader need to know this? Do they care to know this? And I don't think, should they care? Because I'm not trying to tell you what to think about. I'm trying to think, would they find this interesting and necessary to know? So, like, the mayor's kidnapped? Absolutely. They'll want to know. Even though that technically is crime, and we don't really do crime, they'll want to know. Carjacking at Safeway? Unless there's like 5 in a week, and now you should maybe not go to that Safeway or be really careful when you do. Then we'll write about it maybe. But I try to only do things that I think they'll really care about. I guess that's kind of a little bit of the secret sauce, is deciding what and what that's not, because I think it's almost more important about what you don't include than what you do, because you don't want to include things that aren't useful, because if it's not useful, people will stop reading it. And you don't want to include too many things that piss people off, because if you piss them off too much, they'll leave. You can piss them off a little bit, and sometimes you have to talk about uncomfortable things, but you don't want to do it too often. But you definitely don't want to include things that they don't care about. You want to include things like, that's a hard thing when people send stuff in. They're like, "Hey, like my dad wrote a book, and he lives in Annapolis. Will you write about it?" And you're like, "Well, the average person here doesn't really care that your dad wrote a book on how to declaw cats. Like that's not, and that's not a real example, of course, but like that's not
They
relevant.
could
Now,
buy
if
an
your
ad
dad,
if they wanted.
yeah, they could buy an ad, but even though I'd probably be like, it's not going to work very well because nobody's going to buy anything from you. But if your dad wrote a book about our most famous lighthouse, then yeah, that's got to be in there, because people, like, we have this one lighthouse here. I love it too. I'm guilty of this. Everybody is obsessed with it. And so if anybody does anything regarding the lighthouse, it's going to be in the scoop. Any kind of major event that's going to shut down traffic, or if someone who doesn't know about it is driving by downtown or walking by, and they're going to turn their head and be like, "What's that?" Like that's definitely going to be in there, so you know what's up. A lot of times it'll be in there well in advance, so you can find out about it and put it on your calendar if you want to go to it. But yeah, you got to make it. Most importantly, it just has to be valuable every day. If people are bored by it, they're not going to keep reading it, and you have to keep them interested. And you're allowed a
Yeah.
little bit of leeway. Like you don't have to be 10 out of 10 every single day. You can't be for 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. That's not possible.
Yeah.
But you want to be almost always awesome. Some
Yeah.
days there's just not a lot going on. Some days the newsletter is kind of a dud. But I try to, even on those days, how can we make it not a dud? Can we remember a piece of content that we put out like 3 months ago or something that we can reshare? Or can we make something up? Like, can we write a new one real quick? What's going on out there that we can, this one's a dud. How can we make it not a dud? But every once in a while, you just have a dud.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, 550, like, I can't even count. That's like almost 1,000
Yeah, we're doing like
newsletters.
250 of these
Yeah.
things a year. So
Yeah, there we go.
every one can't be great. Like every morning brew is not great. Even when the team that wins the Super Bowl lost a couple games along the way, right? Like it happens.
You keep coming back. That's what matters. So I want to go back to monetization for a little bit. So you've got the ads, and then is there anything else besides ad sales you're making revenue on?
Not significantly. Like we do, the newsletter ads are almost all the revenue. So in March, we billed $15,362 worth of newsletter ads and $0 of social media ads. Next month, hopefully we'll bill around the same number of newsletter ads. And I think we'll do about $2,000 in social media ads. So like you can see that most months the social media is zero. It's just something I don't sell very often. And if I do, maybe it's part of a package, but we just don't do a lot of it. But yeah, everything else right now that we make money off of is minuscule compared to newsletter. Like we have merch that we sell at this pop-up shop, which takes like half the revenue, which is annoying. But even if they didn't take half, it's like maybe $1,500 a year, something like that.
Yeah.
We do
That's
have
the value of your merch being around town, kind of, right?
Yeah, it's more than just the profit made. If it was just the profit made, I wouldn't do it at all. But we also have a membership program where people can support. Yeah, right now it's pretty heavily advertising. It'll probably always be like that. I am thinking about other ways that we can make money, but it's like kind of just the thing that I'm good at. Like I can build an
Yeah.
audience and I can build a super engaged audience. And if I have a super engaged audience, someone is going to want to pay to reach it. Whether that super engaged audience is members of my town here or people out there that want to learn how to start a local newsletter. Like, I think that's what I'm good at, is just building these strong audiences, which is why I want to build another newsletter. And I actually want to hear, I would like to talk about that one at the end, because
Yeah.
I want to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on it, because I have a stupid idea that I think I'm going to do as a test for my next newsletter, or my next non-local newsletter.
Okay. My last question about monetization though is: do you personally make like your full living off of this? And if you do, when did that become true?
Yes, I do. I have, since I quit my job.
Yeah.
But in the first couple of years, there's some creative ways to make that work. So for the first year and 3 months, I lived with my parents. So I didn't have rent and I didn't have to pay for a lot of food. So that makes things a lot cheaper.
It's your seed round.
Yeah, that was my seed round. I like thinking of it like that. The actual seed round, though, was in November of 2021. My dad was like, "You need to move out. You're driving across the bridge to," because they're 45 minutes from Annapolis. They were like, "You're driving across every day, like super early in the morning, and then you're over there working all day, and then you drive home super late, and then you come home and still work, and like you're gonna fall asleep at the wheel. You got to move out. Do you have enough money to move out?" And I was like, "Kind of." And they were like, "Okay, we'll pay you your rent for the first year. If like, could you move out then?" And I was like, "Yeah, you like really are concerned I'm going to fall asleep at the wheel, right?" And they were like, "Yeah, you need to move out. Like it's actually unsafe. You're kind of a workaholic and this is not good." So I did. And I was like, "There's no way I'm letting you help me for a year though." So after 6 months, I was dumb. I should have, if your parents offer that, just take it. Just do it. So I told them at 6 months that I was good, and I was not good. Um, but I was just stubborn and prideful, and I was like, "I'm not letting you do this. It's dumb." Then I was just super poor.
Yeah.
So that was 2 years, 2 years and 3 months in, and then I made like not very much money that year. Always kind of made it through, but there were definitely a couple months where I had to pay my rent late to my cousin, and then that still kind of happened every once in a while. We get into like a cash flow squeeze. I'm not great at accounts receivable, and so we'd have like people that owe us 15 grand, but we wouldn't have it, and I have bills, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, now this year finally got it to a point where I replaced the salary from the job that I quit. It feels so good to not be stressed about money again.
That took like 3 years though to get to that point.
It took like 3.5 years to get to that
Damn.
point. So yeah, kind of sucked. But also like I was focused on paying other people to make the thing bigger. And I was like, I can just get by and figure it out. I can eat cheap food and not go on vacation and just, Spartan lifestyle it, because I think in 25 years it'll be worth it. I'm willing to make that sacrifice. So I always, just for some reason, this is such a vivid description. I always remember, and I don't actually love everything the guy says, but he's kind of smart in some ways. Gary Vee used to say, "Eat a shit burger so you can eat caviar later." And that always stuck with me. And I was like, cool, this is just my shit burger. And I'll, caviar later. And 20 years out, who knows how many years, but like right now, I'll just survive. There's no saving, there's no extravagance. It's just surviving. So yeah, then finally got to this point, and it took me 3.5 years to get to this point. But I think next year, with these new sales reps, and just again, every year that you survive and continue to grow your cachet, and you can raise prices, and then we can have new products. Hoping to go from what I replaced to double that next year. I think that's not unreasonable, and then only up from there, hopefully.
Yeah. Questions about that. But first, I always like to ask people if there's like one really tactical piece of advice you would give to other people working in newsletters, not necessarily local newsletters, but just with newsletters generally, your best piece of advice?
This is kind of annoying advice because it's so stupidly basic, but every time I see stats and numbers, I'm like, this is basic, but it's like, hearing those stories about Kobe practicing the fundamentals. And everybody's like, dude, why are you doing that? You're the best basketball player in the world. And he's like, yeah, why do you think I'm the best basketball player in the world? I do this 8 hours a day or something. And like Steph shooting however many shots he shoots a day. It's the basics are what make you win. And I'm just reminded that people don't do this because I really only spend a lot of time with the people who do. But it's just not quitting. Like so many people are like, I'm going to do a newsletter. And then they write 3 episodes and then they quit. It's like I said, it sounds stupidly basic, but if you commit to writing a newsletter, and you say, I'm going to send it at this time on these days, and then you do that and you don't miss an episode or an edition or whatever you call them for 3.5 years, I'm living proof you'll change your life. I mean, like, hopefully you can do it faster, not be dumb like me. Maybe don't quit your job first. But it's not that complicated. It is hard because, sometimes you don't want to do it. And sometimes that means you got to stay up until 2 a.m. to finish the newsletter to get it out by 6 the next day. But if you just make that, I'm going to make the boneheaded commitment that I'm not going to let I don't care if there's a hurricane or, like my dog dies or I'm sick, because I've written the Scoop sick before. I'm going to get this thing out every single time that I said I'm going to get it out. And I'm going to do that for years. And if you think like that, you're not, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to compete against you. I want to compete against the guy who's like, I got a great idea. And then 3 weeks later, he quits. Like, those are my favorite people to fight.
Yeah. One more tactical question quick too. Because I think I heard you talk about this in the Newsletter Operator podcast. Referral system. I was like struck by how smart you were on referral system stuff. What advice would you give people for building a referral system that actually works?
Well, when you say you're impressed by how smart I am, what you're really impressed by is how good I am at seeing smart things that other people do and then doing the same things, aka copying them. I would honestly say, like, go to if you for like a newsletter referral system, go to lifeofscoop.beehive. It's like the holy grail of local newsletter growth or something is the subject line. And that's like a super, super tactical, like, this is actually how I would build the referral program for local newsletter. But if you like distill down to one piece of advice, is the only thing that matters in a referral system is the first baseline, like the first milestone, because almost nobody will get past that. And so you make that one free and for you to fulfill, and you make it kind of easy to get. Mine's 3 subscribers. A lot of people do 1. A lot of newsletters do 2, but I do 3 because I'm greedy. Make it free, make it automatic for you to fulfill. And that's the only one that you should think about. And you should think a lot about it and like make sure that it is a really well aligned incentive for people to share. I got lucky with mine, and I was like, I'm going to do birthday shout outs for people. And for any local newsletter, I would say, don't even think about it. Just do birthday shout outs, because everybody likes seeing their name in print. And then also, it is a growth tactic too, in and of itself. Like, obviously, if somebody's birthday is in there, they got 3 subscribers, or someone else got 3 subscribers and then used their birthday shout out for somebody else. But so now, if let's say I used my shout out, I got 3 subscribers to sign up and I used mine on you, I'm going to send it to you because I'm like, hey, look, your name's at the top of the thing. And you're like, what thing? And now you sign up. And so now the birthday shout out that I had to get 3 subscribers for has actually given me 4, maybe even better case scenario. Instead of just sending it to you, I put it in our group message of our running group. And there's all, a dozen guys that run together every Saturday morning. And now we get 6 new subscribers out of the plus the 3. So for a local newsletter, I wouldn't even mess around with anything else, just birthday shout outs all day long. But for any other newsletter that's not a local newsletter, the only one I would spend any time, mental energy thinking about would be the first one. And I would spend a lot to make sure that it's a really valuable thing. Like for my Life of Scoop newsletter, where I teach people how to do local newsletters, the first level referral is, I think it's 2 for that one. And it is a PDF of all the tools that I use to run Naptown Scoop and how I use them. So it's just a Google Drive It's a PDF in Google Drive that gets automatically sent to somebody when they get 2 subscribers. It's obviously free for me to send that to them. Didn't cost me anything to make except time. So I could talk about referral programs all day long, and I would go read the thing. But that's the tactical advice: is only think about the first one and make it free for yourself to fulfill.
Okay, so I know we're almost done. So last question. You've been doing this for 3.5 years. Where are you with it in 3.5 years from now?
That's a great question. In 3.5 years from now, Naptown Scoop is definitely doing $1 million in revenue through our main newsletter advertising, and we're going to have a couple other publications that are relevant to town, and they'll increase advertising potential. And then I have one other thing that I'm not going to talk about, but it's kind of like it's an event sort of thing that I think will be big. That'll hopefully be a significant chunk of revenue as well. So Naptown Scoop's doing great. I've also used it to start several other businesses. So I'm actually starting one right now, portable restroom trailers that I'm going to rent to wedding venues and all sorts of places. Anybody who needs bathrooms but doesn't want to rent a porta potty, wants something nicer. I'm going to do a lot of marketing and relationships selling through the Naptown Scoop for that. I will have started something else as well. I don't know if it's going to be a marketing agency. That's something I kind of want to do. I don't know if it's going to be a home services company, like a kind of like fence building. But then also there will be other scoops out there. Finding partners through my Life of Scoop newsletter that I want to operate with, testing that model out for a little while. I might end up going the franchise route or the licensing route. But yeah, in 3.5 years, it's going to look a whole lot different than it does now. There will be certainly multiple of them. Whether I'm owning them or they're franchised is kind of yet to be decided. But I also will have kind of taken over Annapolis. It'll undoubtedly be the most popular news source. I mean, it kind of already is, but in 3.5 years, it'll be unstoppable.
Yeah, you'll be eating caviar every day.
I don't know about every day, but I
day.
always dream about being able to buy like actual true international first class flights with cash. And those generally include caviar. So, hopefully once or twice a year.
Works out, yeah. I guess just to end it, is there anything specific you want to plug for the listeners?
Yeah, well, if you want to learn how to do a local newsletter, follow at lifeof_scoop on Twitter and go to lifeofscoop.beehive.com. I write about it every week for free, and it's like really actual tactical stuff. Like today, I wrote about, getting the right physical swag to promote your newsletter. A lot of people overlook that for newsletters, but it matters in a local newsletter. And so I tell people exactly how to do that. 2 weeks ago, we talked exactly how to do a referral program, like step by step, how to build it. So super practical advice that most people would be charging for. And I do newsletter consulting as well. And I definitely charge for stuff on that newsletter. I'm not doing it for fun. It's there to make money. But there's a ton of free value given away because I think that the right way to make yourself a lot of money is to create a lot of value for other people and then take a little bit of it as payment. So definitely selling things on there, but getting a lot for free too. You could never pay me $1 and you could learn a whole lot. But then I want to go back to that other newsletter that I'm thinking about doing. And I want to get your idea, your opinion on this.
Do you want me to keep recording it or turn off the recording?
Yeah, no, I want this to be in there. I think it'll be fun.
Okay,
I want to hear what people think. So I've wanted to do this forever. I've wanted to do a newsletter about super yachts. And the reason I want to do that is because that's obviously a humongous ticket item. Like if let's say I started a super yacht newsletter, and maybe let's say I was writing about pool charter yachts, and somebody reached out to me and said, that yacht is awesome. Can you put me in touch with that broker for the charter? And I called the charter broker and said, I have somebody interested in this. I have this newsletter. If you haven't heard of it, they would look it up because they probably wouldn't have. And they're going to rent this yacht from you for the week. How much is that worth for you to pay me? And for some of these boats, you're talking about a $250,000 rental for the week. That's obviously going to be worth something. And so it could be a huge business with very few actual customers. That could be amazing. On a totally different spectrum, if somebody read it and was like, that's a super cool boat, I actually want to buy that boat, you're talking about a $30 million purchase price, sometimes far more, just massive, massive transactions. And so I've always wanted to do something in that and kind of see if I can capture any of that value. But the thing that I'm thinking about, this is the stupid idea, is because obviously to do any of those transactions, whether you're spending 250 grand in a week on vacation or you're buying a $30 million thing, you're having a lot of money. So I'm thinking about making this newsletter cost money to read because I want it to be perceived as a higher value. And also I want to make money. So it would cost money to read. And this newsletter totally should be free. Like, it's not the kind of newsletter that you would probably pay for. It'll highlight the news that's happening in the super yacht industry. It will highlight the transactions that are happening. If a notable boat is sold or listed, that'll be in there. And then we'll obviously highlight and write about specific boats and also like new technology. There's always new people. You'd be surprised how much of an industry super yachts are. There's a lot happening. And so we'll also highlight places to go on your super yacht, whatever. All that, that's the kind of content we'll write. But then here's the really dumb idea. I want to make it not invite only, but I want there to be an application to be able to read it. And not actually just to be able to read it. Like, I want you to have to ask me for permission to pay to
fucking
read
onboarding survey. This is like, you have to actually
if so I want basically two kinds of readers. I want ultra rich people, and I think that they will have to provide proof of funds to read this thing. Or we can also, let's say, for example, you could use your LinkedIn to somehow verify that you got the scratch to buy some of these boats or to charter. Like, if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and you send me your email address, like you sign up and you send me your LinkedIn and then you connect with me or something, you can verify it in ways that are not taking a screenshot of your bank account. And then if you're in the industry, you just send your credentials. Like, oh, if you're a charter broker for Northrop & Johnson, cool. Like, send me an email from your work account and we'll be good. Like, that you'll get into. And so maybe industry people get a discount on it. I don't know. I'm just like, what do you think of that idea? Because I've always liked the idea of, you can't have this content unless you belong to the club. I've never done anything that actually takes advantage of that, tries that theory. But for this one, I feel like, given the exclusivity of the industry, it kind of fits.
Yeah. No, I think it's like, it's an insane idea, but you only need literally a handful of people to actually sign up and subscribe, right? So it's like, I think it's just about
could have 500 subscribers and be worth a couple $100,000 because those 500 subscribers could be serious power players.
Which is, I imagine, being in Annapolis, some boat people, you have some kind of entree into this world, right? So I think that makes sense.
There's not a lot of super yachting in Annapolis.
No,
I'm talking about boats that are 40 meters or more. Like, there's only.
But you know more about boats than I do, like ships, boats, whatever. Like, more than your average person. So, or that world. So I think it's just a matter of deciding I'm going to try this for however many months and put X time and energy and money into setting it up. And then it's okay, well, maybe but then I guess once you start, you just keep going. But yeah, because it's if you only need 10 people to sign up to do it, then it's worth the gamble, I think. But it's an insane idea.
It's kind of a dumb idea, but I'm I kind of like it. You have to apply for the right, and then you still have to pay. I don't know. But I think that's how you kind of create the value when there is no value, where it's or the perceived value. But who cares if I start a newsletter about super yachts? But if you can't read it, unless I say you're allowed to read it, and you have to pay.
Why are you keeping me out?
Maybe it's worth something. Maybe this guy's got it going on. Who knows? I don't know.
You should
if you're listening,
you should send them a metal business card too once they sign up or something. You have your actual club
especially
card.
If it's $800 a year. You can spend a lot of money acquiring customers or treating them well once you have them. So if you're still listening to this and wherever this gets put into the podcast, DM me on Twitter or just write at me at lifeof_scoop and tell me why this idea is terrible or why it's amazing or what you would do differently. Really interested in this super yacht industry. Also, just as a nerdy engineer and a lover of the finer things in life, dream of spending my vacations on a $40 million boat someday.